Good morning, everyone. Good to see all of you here this morning. If you're visiting with us, we want you to know that you're a welcome guest. Good morning to those of you who are back in the remote service. We're glad you're here with us as well. Let me share with you just a bit of good news that's separate from my lesson this morning. As you know, Guy Orbison, he's kind of been a little bit like a sacred cow here over the years. He's been at almost all of our lectureships. In fact, he's been to all of our lectureships. And this year he was not able to make it because of his wife. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Didn't look really good. They went through an extensive surgery and so forth, and they got news here last week that she is completely cancer-free. And so she's on her road back to recovery. I think she lost like 75 pounds and some other things, but she's starting to feel better and starting to get some of her strength back. And my plan is, Lord willing, that Lori and I will go down and visit them after our lectureship is over with and so forth. But anyway, that's certainly is some good news, and I thought you'd want to know about that. Well, as you know, 4 weeks ago, we celebrated our National Back to Church Sunday, and in those lessons there, we had kind of centered around the subject of being togetherness in all things, and it is an incredible thing. And I said to you that the purpose of Back to Church Sunday, and even in conjunction with our Friends Day, was not so much the idea of filling up pews or filling seats. I think that's a good thing because each person sitting in the seat represents a soul. But mainly our priority is that we want to be able to help people get filled up with God and to filled up with Jesus and to know what it means to be together with one another. And so in the very first lesson 3 weeks ago, I talked to you about together, we were able to find peace. We're able to find peace with God and we're able to find peace with one another. And that's an incredible thing when you think about God's graciousness and His mercy, that He'd want to have a relationship with you and that He made it possible for you to be at peace with Him through the blood of His Son, Jesus Christ. And that we can come from all walks of life and be at peace with one another is a tremendous blessing. The next week I talked to you about together we experience love. We experience the love of God that is not based on strings attached, but it's based upon the very nature of who God is, and hence He commanded us to love one another in a very self-sacrificing kind of way. And then in the next lesson, I talked to you about together we can grow stronger, that we can, get stronger in our faith, get stronger in our character, get stronger as a congregation. This morning, I want to share with you this lesson here, and that is together we can change the world. It's possible for us to really make a dent in our world. It's possible for us to change our world if we would certainly put ourselves completely all the way into it and be sold out in a very real kind of way. So let me begin this way. Who is your favorite superhero? Didn't expect that, did you? Anyway, so who is your favorite superhero? Superheroes are extremely popular today. People love superheroes. In fact, we probably are living in the golden age of superheroes. A lot of the major motion pictures that are produced these days have to do with superheroes. They make millions of dollars bringing forth these movies. They're movies like, Spider-Man and Batman and Captain America. There are people like Thor. He didn't look so good in the last picture, but Black Panther and Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel. Then you get over to the different kinds of leagues, the Incredibles, the Avengers, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Justice League. There's all kinds of superheroes that are out there. There are some that are not lesser known kinds of superheroes like Ant-Man, or Aquaman, and of course Shazam. I was sharing these with my granddaughter last night, and she knew all of them, and I said, who's this Shazam guy? And anyway, she says, well, they made a motion picture about him. So all of them have motion pictures being made about them. And so, people really love superheroes, and I get it. I think people love superheroes because they're fun. They really are a lot about the embodiment of our imagination. All of us wish that there was someone or something that could, just with a zap take something out, or maybe take someone out. We'd like to, sometimes we just like to think of ourselves as having that kind of power. And superheroes, in terms of movies and so forth, they do good things. They fight evil. They are able to take care of justice. They defeat evil. They save the world. And that, when you think about that, those are all good things. And And we like to think about things of that nature. And so superheroes help us to somewhat, disengage from the world around us and to involve ourselves into the fantasy of what life we wish would be about and so forth. And so superheroes are big things. But here's the question I want to ask you, and it's this. Do you think the world needs more superheroes? I mean, do you think we need more superheroes? Here's what I believe. Okay, this is just my opinion, but the world doesn't need more superheroes. I don't think we need more fantasy guys. I think what we really need more than superheroes is guys like this behind me, Mr. Rogers. Now, I know that when I was a young man and I was raising my children watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I remember looking at that thing and I go, oh man, just kill me with 1,000 slices or something. But this guy, but then as I got older and I started to look at, Fred Rogers and so forth and recognize how this guy really was a hero of his age in very real kinds of ways. You know that his main idea was to reach out to the little ones, to children. He had over 895 episodes. If you want to put that into, just into perspective, think about Friends and Cheers and shows like that. They were mega hits in terms of TV and so forth. But Friends, they only had like 274 episodes. This guy had 895 episodes, and he had this calm demeanor about him. He was slow of pace. He was just easygoing. And you know why he started it? Because he hated TV. Instead of him going into the ministry, full-time ministry and so forth, he decided to go into TV because one day he went over and visited his parents' house who had bought themselves a TV and encountered it in 1951. After watching it for a while, he hated it. In a CNN interview where they were talking about it, he said of TV that he said, you know what? He goes, I went into TV because I hated it so much, but I thought there's some use in this fantastic instrument that could do good and that I could reach out to people and that maybe I could really make some huge changes in our world, and Mr. Rogers was able to do that. So, superheroes or Mr. Rogers? Well, in superhero fashion, let's have a showdown. We'll have a showdown to see, which one should we go with the most. And so when it comes down to superheroes or Mr. Rogers, here we go. Raw strength and rugged looks, who gets that point? Well, Captain America, you can't beat the looks of that guy. At least that's what the movies say and so forth. So superheroes, you have to give them 1, maybe even 2 points, because they're pretty good-looking guys, pretty good-looking gals and so forth, and they do some incredible things. How about saving the world? Well, in saving the world, truth of the matter is that these superheroes that I showed you a little bit ago, none of those guys save the world. They don't save the world because they're fantasy guys. They really don't exist. Whereas when you talk about Mr. Rogers really is the real deal. And so fake versus real, well, I think you got to give that to Mr. Rogers because he is the real deal, and he did make changes. And if he didn't make changes, he wouldn't have 895 episodes. He'd be done in like 5 or 10 of the things. Superheroes' pride and arrogance versus Mr. Rogers' quiet and humble attitude. Well, if you've watched any of the superheroes, then you know that those guys wear their feelings on their sleeves, and that's why they zap people when they get in their way and so forth. But Mr. Rogers, there's not a lot of arrogance seen in this man. There wasn't a lot of pride seen in this man. You see a lot of quietness, a humble attitude, and so I give another point to Mr. Rogers in that one. One more. Superhero independence or Mr. Rogers' cooperation. Almost all superheroes had their person that helped them out. Batman and Robin, and so you have those superheroes that had their sidekick that helped them out and so forth. But Mr. Rogers, he was a kind of a unique individual that he did something in his own time that no one else was was doing. You might could say Captain Kangaroo, okay, or someone like that. But Mr. Rogers, there was a realness to him as he'd walk into this little studio, and he'd take off his shoes and put on his slippers and then put on his sweater and so forth. The only thing that ever caught my attention is the guy always walked away and forgot to take off his microphone. But anyway, Mr. Rogers, so which one between, independence or cooperation? Well, okay, so you're saying, well, you're a preacher, and that's why you really like Mr. Rogers better than you do superheroes. No, I don't like Mr. Rogers more than the superheroes because of who they are and what they are. I like him because those other guys don't exist. But Mr. Rogers does. And I would say to you, does the world need more fantasy heroes? The answer is no. The world needs more Mr. Rogers. And the reason why they need more Mr. Rogers is because Mr. Rogers, he built his show around the characteristics of Jesus Christ. He really did. He was very frank about that. He built his whole idea of how to live life and how to show children's life through the lens of who Jesus Christ is. And so we need men and women like Mr. Rogers because we need more of Jesus in this world. And that's how you change the world. You don't change the world with superheroes. You change the world with real people, authentic people, people who love other people. That's how you make a huge change in the world. And so that's why I believe as a church, we can learn a lot about creating space for people from this man, how to encourage them. You know how encouraging he was to children? I looked at different kinds of images of Mr. Rogers throughout his 895 episodes, and the kind of people that he dealt with was always in a loving, caring, kind, and gentle manner where he encouraged them, where he dreamed with them, where he listened to them, where he walked with them. And these simple acts changed and impacted those small minds in a true way that he really did change the world. And he changed the world one child at a time. That's why when I think about superheroes and I think about men and women who really do make a difference and who really do change the world, they're people, they really are people like this. And in the same way we as a church can change and impact the world. When we share peace, when we share unity, when we're encouraging, when there's kindness and grace coming out of us, when that happens with us, when we are more than just church goers, where we're more than just those who show up, for an hour and 15 minutes on a Sunday and an hour on Sunday night and an hour on Wednesday, when we become those who really take the things that are being taught in the scriptures and we internalize them and they make them a part of our hearts, then I'm just here to tell you that we will change things because we'll change ourselves. And when we change into the image of God and more like Jesus Christ, we can't help but make an impact in our world in a very real kind of way. And you don't have to be a superhero or a superpower to do any of that. You just need to be consistent in your walk with Jesus. So let me ask you to open your Bibles to our text for this morning. It's found over in Ephesians chapter 4. I touched on it last Sunday morning, but I want to maybe drill just a little bit deeper into it this morning. It's found in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verses 32 through chapter 5 and verse 2. Listen to what Paul says. Let's start with verse 31. Let our bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you along with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other just as God in Christ also forgave you. Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love just as Christ also loved you and gave himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. I want you to focus in on verse 32 in chapter 5 and verse 1, and I guess verse 2 too, and I want you to see how he says, put off these things and put on these things, and be imitators of God. God is tender-hearted. God is kind. God is forgiving. God is love. And so Paul says, let's be imitators of that. That's something that is a life-changing kind of thing. And so as I thought about that, I thought about, okay, where are we as a congregation, and where can we go that would change the world? And I ran across this little statement behind me. It's called Dream Big, Start Small, Act Now. It's a fellow by the name of Robin Sharma who came up with it. Robin Sharma is probably one of the top 5 leading experts on leadership development and so forth. I think he's written a bunch of books. I think he's written like $15 million worth of books. You know, he's one of the most world-read authors around. To be honest with you, I've never heard of him before I found this picture here. And so he might have wrote a book called Dream Big, Start Small, Act Now, but I haven't read it, if he did. And I try to find it. You know, the only book that I could find that he wrote was where it says something about a monk sells his Ferrari. And he became a million copy seller, a huge #1 seller and so forth. But so I'm kind of ripping off this thing here, at least the points there, and I'm going to develop the lesson from here on in terms of dreaming big. Now, I don't know what Sharma said, but I know that this about dreaming big, all accomplishments begins with a dream. Big or small, they all begin with someone that had a dream. Almost all of you, as soon as I put this slide up here, knows exactly what that symbol or logo or brand is, don't you? No, it's a guy who took a bite of an apple, but yeah, it's Apple. You know, Apple, you know, it's an American multi-technological company. It's the big 4: Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook. I mean, it's absolutely huge. It started out really small, by the way. It didn't start off like this huge, giant corporation. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, and who's that other guy that helped him do that? Can you remember, Zach? Who's that other third guy? Oh, I thought for sure you would know when I'd ask that. I think it's some kind of Wagner guy or something like that. But the one who rose to the top eventually was Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs made this statement here. He says, "We're here to put a dent in the universe, otherwise why else even be here?" There's a lot of truth to that. In other words, what he's saying is that all of us have a purpose, and if our purpose is not to make a dent, if our purpose is not to make a change in the world, then why are we here? It starts with a dream. If you were to look a lifespan of Stephen Jobs, starting in 1951 and then go on this way, he was an adopted son. He comes down around to his life. He gets to college. He quits college, goes on a spiritual journey for about that long, and then he has a big blank space in his life where they started Apple and all that, but nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden the tech age happens for about the 10 years, and in that 10 years he becomes a phenom, along with Wozniak and so forth. But it started with a dream. Or a great civil rights leader dreamed big about humanity, about human equality that is not based upon the color of a man's skin, and that, of course, was Martin Luther. You can't see this up here, but it says, "I have a dream deeply rooted in the American dream, that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That little black boys and little black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls and walk together as sisters and brothers." A dream that started back in the 60s and has moved forward. Now here we are in 2021 where we're still moving towards that era. I mean, I think we've come a long, long, long way in that dream, but there's still some to go in it. I love what he said. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But by all means, you keep moving. If you want your dreams to happen, there is a tenacity that is involved with it. Or how about this one here? You know what you're looking at in this picture? What is this a picture of? Well, I can tell you this. It's a picture of a orange grove or an orchard in Anaheim that would become Disneyland. When Walt Disney took Art Linkletter, which none of you younger people know, but all you older people do, he took Art Linkletter out there and he showed this land. He told them of his dream, and Art Linkletter says, "You're nuts," and walked away from it. And Art Linkletter said it was the worst mistake he ever made in his life. Because this guy had a dream. If you can dream it, you can do it. First think, second dream, third believe, finally dare. And as a result of that, there's Disneylands there. Disneyland Anaheim, Disney World in Kissimmee, Florida, Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disneyland, Shanghai Disney Resort, Disneyland Hong Kong. And it all began with a dream, a small dream that I'll talk about after a while here. So it all begins with a dream, but I want you to know that Jesus had a dream for his church. And his dream, big dream, was about people, about all humanity. It begins all the way back in eternity, where the council of God came together in Acts, the 2nd chapter, in verse 23, the Bible says, and they had a plan where Jesus Christ was going to come into this world in order to save those who would listen to him and believe in the good news. And his dream was big in Mark 16 and verse 15. Go preach the gospel to all creation. Go proclaim the good news that God has sent his Son into the world to die for sinners, of which you are, and that you can be saved. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. He that disbelieves shall be condemned. But go into all the world. That's huge. That's a big dream. Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. All nations, that's big. Or verse 8 of chapter 1, you shall be my witnesses, he said to his apostles. You shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the remotest parts of the world. And it came true by the time you got to Colossians 1 and verse 23, the gospel had went into the entire known world. That's a big dream. We call that the Great Commission. And it was a dream that was given to you, and it was a dream that it was given to me. Jesus was our world changer, and he is saying that we can change the world. And in the first century, there said that the apostles, as they went into a certain city, says, they have turned our world upside down. Changing the world. It starts with a dream. Linder Rhodes had dreams in the past. We have a dream to grow as a congregation spiritually first. That's what we're talking about together and so on. That's why we're talking about building bridges to God and building bridges to our community and building bridges together with one another. We have a dream of growing spiritually, but we have a dream of growing numerically. And not just so we can say we got a fat building with a lot of people in it. It's because we know that each number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, equals a soul that's going to spend eternity somewhere. We have a dream to influence our community and beyond for Jesus. Not just what we can do in the city of Meridian, but what can we do outside the city of Meridian? What can we do in the Ukraine? What can we do in Africa? What can we do in Guatemala? What can we do in the lives of those children at Mountain States Children's Home or those who are in Gallup, New Mexico? What can we do to make a change? We have a dream of one day owning a facility that will seat 800 souls so that we have people who are back there inside here with us. We're not sure what that facility will look like just yet, but we have a building team that are working on several concepts. I've seen a couple of bird's eye views of the concepts. They look really exciting, at least to me, but we have a dream that could be a possibility if we can hack it somehow financially. And if not, we have several realtors who are looking for property that we could purchase or renovate or do something. We know that our building is slowing us up. It hasn't stopped us, but there's room to grow even here, but that would help us also. We have a dream of more classes and more teachers and more missions and more fellowship and more service and more and more and more. We have dreams. It has to start with a dream. But there's a caution. The caution is often when we think of making an impact on the world or change in the world, we get hung up on thinking of just the great big acts, superhero kinds of things done by outliers like Disney and Jobs and Einstein and Edison, when maybe that's not what we should be dreaming of. Maybe we should dream, big things on a smaller scale. In other words, to change the world, big dreams start small. Big dreams don't just go boom and it happens. Big dreams start small. Apple didn't start big, it started small. The civil rights movement didn't start big, it started small with a dream. Or like Disney, well, it started with a mouse. Kind of an ugly one when you think about it. Well, that's my opinion. But it started with a mouse and a dream. But most dreams and change requires a start, and most starts require small steps, not big steps. Our dream is not about buildings or making a name. It's all about changing and impacting people's lives. That's what our dream is. That's what our dream should always be. We must never lose focus that what the church is about and what Jesus is about people. is about souls. Not buildings, not programs, none of that stuff. It's about souls. And so you start small. Simple acts make huge impacts. Huge impacts. Being kind. Anyone in here that doesn't want to be treated kindly? Anyone in here that doesn't want to have someone be tender-hearted toward them? Is there anyone in here that does not want to be forgiven? Are you people perfect out there? Is there anyone so perfect that you are never in need of forgiveness or someone to give you some slack? Well, I know that I'm probably one that needs it on a regular basis, okay? But we need that. A smile. Can you put a price tag on a smile? Just someone to smile at you. A question. How are you doing? How are things going? How's your mom? How's your dad? How's your children? Just a question that says, I know you exist. I know you have a life. An encouraging word. A listening ear. So, someone just to talk to. I know there's lonely people in our congregation. Someone just to talk to. Just give me an ear. Listen to what I have to say about some things. And when you multiply that through many people, continue over time, you begin to build into a powerful force that is able to change things. Think about the consistency of things. Most powerful change is slow and steady, but it comes through a consistency, and it comes through time. Nothing happens fast. Think about Arches National Park down around Moab, Utah. And look at those fins that are there. That came through a period of time. Or the rushing of forceful water that carves out canyons and holes and things of that nature. A consistency, a time kind of thing. I believe that with time, and us being consistently kind and forgiving and loving and sacrificial, that over time, you change the world. We change things in that kind of a manner. The church started small. It didn't start off huge. It started small. It started with Jesus 3 years prior, choosing 12 men among all the disciples that were following him, and he taught them, and he was an example, and he modeled for them about life and discipline and things of that nature. And he began to put himself into their hearts, and then he set them loose on the world, just 12 of them, and on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 were baptized into Christ, and countless millions since then. Linder Road started small. Linder Road began with a dream of 11 people that said, okay, there's a church in Boise, there's a church in Meridian, there's a church in Midvale and some other places, but there's no church in Meridian. And so several came from different places, and they came here, and with a dream, they began Meridian. The Kung Fu Church of Christ. They didn't call themselves that. But it's there on Main Street. You can still find it there. It's no longer called the Kung Fu Church of Christ. Now I think it's a bicycle shop. But it used to be a church building. I remember going there on Monday night singings, and I remember when George Freeman was a young guy. A young guy. Great singer, but he's a really young guy. The only guy younger was me. But he was a young guy. I remember how big George was. Kind of like a mountain man big guy, but it began there at that place. They merged with 26 and Aaron. I think that ran you guys up to like 26 people or something like that. They had a dream, and so they sold off that building. They 26 and Aaron got rid of their building. They sold the Kung Fu building. They put their money together and started dreaming about what next move they're going to make. I think they hired Virgil Hammondtree as your pulpit minister and so forth. They rented an office over a building off of Cole Street. I visited there when I was preaching in Caldwell. They rented an old post office building over on Main Street for a building from Sally Gardner, who's since passed and so forth. 1993, they had a dream to build the building which you are now sitting. They built this first part here. You can see where these lines are here. This was the original building. This was it. I was looking at the names of those guys who put their name on paper to pay off that mortgage. I think it was around $300,000+ at that time. 6 men put their names on the line there. Bob Roberts was one of them. He's a former elder here. Bob Roberts heard made this statement here. He goes, I hope God forgives us for building so small. And then, of course, there were renovations. That part came in first. That part came in second. We redid the foyer out there, put a library, which since we've renovated into a classroom and an office, we added on to the fellowship hall there. We've redone those classrooms back there, I don't know how many different times. We put on the media room back there. The fire marshal said, no more building on that building. Next time you run one single screw in, you're going to sprinkle this whole place, which is $100,000 back 5 years ago. I'll tell you what it costs now. But we started small. With 11 people, now we have a remote service to take care of numbers. We have full-time preachers. Clyde Lockermer, he's in the audience here somewhere. He was the first preacher. And then came Herman Pope. And then came Jim Rich. And then the merger of 26th and Aaron and Meridian, and then they hired Virgil Hammondtree. That's when you guys really took off, is when you got Virgil here. Virgil could preach. And then you hired Kerry Williams. He was here about 4 years, and then I've been here 18 in February. So we've went through a lot of change. We hired a full-time second man 12 years ago in Clint Davison. Just recently we hired our first-time youth worker in Jared McCormick. We're so glad that he came and along with his family to us, and today our membership, men, women, and children, is 474. We began small with 11, and 474 now. I hope one day we'll look back, this congregation, I'll be dead and long gone, and I hope we'll look back and they'll say, yeah, they started with 11, they grew up to 470 people in 2021, and here we are, 1,200 members now looking back. See how we started small back then? You know, it's just a dream. But it all begins by starting small. And then finally, to change the world, you got to act now. You just can't sit back and wait for things to happen. Waldoon says the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. That's what they did on the day of Pentecost. On the day of Pentecost, Jesus was done talking. And we've spent 3 years preparing you, man. Now it's time to start doing. And they started doing. And they changed their world. And you today are sitting here because of that change. Because they dreamed big. Because they started small, and then they began to act. Together as a church, we can change the world. I'm convinced of that. The church, it matters. It matters because it's a place to find support. There's co-laborers. We're not in this by ourselves. We're working together as a body, a family of God. There's cheerleaders. We need people to encourage us and to build us up and to strengthen us. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about people like Debbie Lynn. I'm talking about people like Patty Amix. I'm talking about people like Mike Kish, who are positive and who kind of cheerlead us and encourage us and push us a little bit. And many, many others, I could tell you. It's a safe place to dream big, to plan big ideas. It's a place to support one another. It's a place to hold each other accountable. Encourages to take small steps. Encourage each other to be authentic, to be the real deal. And it happens one person at a time and one relationship at a time. That's how you change the world. You don't change it in big deals. You change it in small things in small kinds of ways. So what does it take to impact the world? Well, Paul later in the 6th chapter, actually he begins in the 5th chapter, around verse 21, and he'll talk about healthy households. And he'll go into the 6th chapter. In that section there, he'll talk about healthy households, healthy marriages, because they're a microcosm of what the church really is. The church of strength begins with its families being strong marriages, healthy marriages, and parents and children and family. It's choosing to be kind. It's choosing to show compassion. It's choosing to understand, the understanding over judgment. It's choosing to give grace instead of anger. It's choosing service over position. It's choosing to reach out to our world. It's choosing to reach to our family members, our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, teachers, students, and beyond. Together we can change the world. Of course, we had Back to Church Sunday, and you say, okay, well, I'm glad this thing's over with, because we've done like 4 Back to Church Sundays here. And so why does Back to Church Sunday matter? And the answer is because church matters. It matters because community matters. Connections matter. Unity matters. Living a part of God's family, that all matters. When we pursue these things together we find peace. Peace with God, peace with one another. Together we experience love, God's love, that's poured out among us, and we allow it to flow from us to those who are around us. Together we grow stronger. We grow stronger in God's grace. We journey together, and we go stronger in those areas. And as a collaborative work, the stronger we get, the more impact we're able to make on those who are around us. And together we change the world. We plug into different kinds of ways. It's up to you to kind of decide where you're going to fit. How are you going to get there? I just now saw you, Clyde. I was looking for you over there because you normally sit over there and you wouldn't moved over here. But we move together. We grow together. Together we can change the world. Closing thoughts. Let's continue pursuing this togetherness thing. Let's lean into the concept of together to deepen our relationships with one another. Maybe it's that of taking the next step. A good step for you is that you're going to decide that you're just going to always be here. That you'll commit to be one who attends on the first day of the week. Tonight we have services at 6 o'clock that you'll be here tonight. Sunday we have classes at 7 o'clock where we deepen your faith there. Art started his class last week. Man, he did a great job with that class, and so you might want to think about that. Of course, we have classes for all ages. Connect to a small group. I've talked about that in the past. Maybe it's just greeting someone around you that you don't know. I would suggest that instead of getting up and talking to the people you always know and kind of hang with, that you kind of seek out someone that maybe you don't know. Someone who is a stranger. Not someone who's strange looking, but someone who's a stranger. And get to know them a little bit. Going out to lunch, just as a casual acquaintance. Just go out to lunch with each other. Darla, maybe you'd like to take me out to lunch today. I don't know. There's just a place in this church for every single one of us together. And it all begins by changing. And here's what I believe. It begins by changing yourself. You can't change the world until you change you. And you can't change the world effectively for Jesus if you don't have a relationship with him. And so that's why if you're not a Christian, you have been baptized into Christ for the remission of your sins. As they were commanded on the day of Pentecost when 3,000 did so, maybe that's what you need to do this morning. Or if maybe you've been kind of hanging out there on the fringes of what the church is about, maybe today will be your day that says, I'm going to commit to this body of people here. And I'm not going to just be a guy who shows up or a gal who shows up at church on Sunday. I'm going to become a real part of this family, this body. And I'm going to dream. And I'm going to start small, and I'm going to act right now. And today's the day I'm going to do that. So let me close with the words that Paul closed with as he wrote to those Ephesians. Peace be with you, dear brothers and sisters, and may God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, give you love with faithfulness. May God's grace be eternally upon you, all who love our Lord Jesus Christ. Together we can do this. Together we can change the world. Together we can change things by us changing things right now. While together we stand and sing and give you opportunity.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus.